I'm just hanging out, David. I just have the little countdown on my phone. Do you count down to media days or do you count down to kickoff, given the profession that you're in?
I do both. So I count down to media days, right? Like to me, there's several like benchmarks throughout the offseason you got to get to. Spring game, right? If your school still has one, and the signing day, spring game, and then to me, it's when you have these spring meetings. It's really the summer meetings because it happens in May, in my opinion. And then you have SEC Media Days. But SEC Media Days is that point where you turn the page. You're like, all right, now it's for real hot sports take season.
Yeah, you got to figure out, if you're a fan, you got to figure out, like, how serious are you? Because if you're just, I'm not going to call you a casual, but if you're a more passive fan, like a level 2 fan, media days don't matter to you. So you're just counting down to kickoff. I remember growing up, obviously, I've long since been in the tier 1 category. So I know the lineup at media days by now. If I'm in high school, if I'm in middle school, I already know who's speaking at 9 a.m. on the Wednesday of media day. So that's how like chomping at the bit I used to be to get anything other than a preview magazine by this point.
Josh, I have my boys turned 17 yesterday. I have twin boys that turned 17. And just hanging out with them and their friends, I have noticed that kids today watch sports differently than we did, okay? My boys will watch an A&M football game with me. Well, actually, no, I'm working. An A&M basketball game when I'm sometimes watching from home. They'll watch the entire thing with me. And they'll watch an entire soccer game. But a lot of times, they get their game experience through social media, right? So I feel like a lot of the younger fans are losing the nuance of what happens in the game. If you go to Kyle Field, you're going to be there the entire time. It's going to be electric. But I'm just talking about maybe those casuals you were talking about, how they consume games. Have you noticed that there's kind of been a loss of what really happened in this highlight culture that started in the 90s with SportsCenter, don't get me wrong, but now with social media, it really has become highlight culture?
Yeah, this is never going to affect football like it's affected baseball. The entire phenomenon of the Savannah Bananas, I believe, was born through this. Mm-hmm. I believe was born through highlight culture, started with SportsCenter culture, evolved into social media highlight culture, which equals I'm not going to watch a 2-3 hour baseball game that's game 101 of 162 when I can just see the highlights. But that becomes an entire generation grows up on highlights, and that's their concept and impression of baseball. And so someone who is very business-minded looks and says, well, if that is an entire generation's idea of baseball, and also, we've got elements of, let's say, pro wrestling, and we've got elements of baseball, and we got elements of Harlem Globetrotters. If that's what's clicking, let's try this concept out. And now they're selling out baseball. They're selling out football stadiums to play a version of baseball that would not have been able to exist 25 or 30 years ago. This is not me passing judgment on whether that's a bad or good thing. It just is a thing. And I think, yeah, it affects football, David. But it really has affected baseball.
Yeah, it's, to me, like for what we do for a living, I can tell if I discuss something and I didn't watch every pitch, right? Yep. If I'm looking at a box score, if I am just basing it on tweets about a game, like there's only so much time to watch every SEC. I think SEC football is different because there's 8 games typically you're paying attention to, non-conference more, but like when it comes to everything else that we kind of have to talk about, it becomes very difficult. And I can tell myself when discussing it, I don't know the emotion, the memory attached to that moment unless I watch it. And hopefully I watched it live.
Yeah, that's me. Now, here's what else you have to guard against. So I feel the same way you just described. I think you also have to guard against this thing. I did it the other day. Ironically, during the College World Series, the elimination game, when Coastal Carolina's head coach got thrown out of the game. I was not watching that live. So I was coming out of church, had gone to the gym, about to go into the office to do the show. And I think I was leaving the gym, and I looked, and about 10 minutes prior, it had all happened. Mm-hmm. Already, you look at it, and since I feel strongly about that topic, I feel moved to make a statement. And so I did. I saw little snippets of it. So I had
Sure.
seen at least something that happened, but I hadn't seen the entire lead up. I didn't know whether the guy had been warned multiple times. I'm not going to lie and say I had watched every pitch of every inning prior to that. But I put something out. And then I was driving into the office, which is not a long drive from where I work out. And I was thinking to myself, hold up, you hypocrite. I didn't look in the mirror per se, but I said, you haven't even been watching that full game. And you just commented on it. And it's the same thing you get mad at other people for doing. And then my but was, yeah, but that's in football. I get mad in football. Do whatever you want to in baseball. That's how I explained it away. So I don't want any blame, David. I just want credit. That's all I want.
Did your opinion change after a little more time of that whole incident? Because I look at that coach, and I forget his name at the moment. I should remember it. He's awesome. But I'm looking at how he handled that press conference, the way he's handled other moments. I'm like, I could play for that dude.
Yeah. No, mine has not changed. So the reason I did feel comfortable enough running with it is, number one, the umpire's name was Angel, and I've never known a great umpire whose name is Angel at any level. And secondly, I felt pretty confident. Sometimes you feel in looking at some of the people who are saying some of the things, like there are people I respect, okay? If 5 of them are in lockstep agreement on a strongly held opinion about a sporting event, I could pretty well guarantee you I'm going to agree with them. Now, I know I'm not going to agree with them all the time on everything, but if 5 of them have a visceral reaction that's all in unison, I'm probably going to agree with that. And then, of course, I've long had a problem in sports, but especially in baseball, with this, for lack of a better term, this God complex sometimes that umpires get. And I think it bleeds down from the major league level because that's the strongest union that any group of officials has in any sport is Major League Baseball umpires. And they've always carried themselves as untouchable. I always thought, even when I was a kid, David, I always thought it's so weird that there are multiple major league umpires that have nicknames. I would watch a Braves game on a Tuesday night, and Skip Carey would be reading the starting lineups for each team, and then he'd show you the home plate umpire, first base, second base, third base, and like Cowboy Joe West is behind the plate tonight. Why would an umpire ever have a nickname? Well, it's because they're all around for 50 years because you can't get rid of them. And number 2, because they make sure they're part of the show, which shouldn't be the case, but it is. So then that bleeds down into the college ranks, and, it kind of culminates with an elimination game, and guy disagreed on balls and strikes. You're out of here. Why? Well, you can't question me. It's the World Series for me, too, bro. You can't question me. Just terrible. So, no, I don't regret posting it. I don't regret a thing I said.
Kevin Schnall, by the way, is the Coastal Carolina head coach. So a few weeks back, we were discussing a narrative out there that has the SEC taken a step back, okay? And now that baseball's over, we've got national championships in softball, swimming and diving, women's gymnastics, men's track, women's tennis, baseball, softball, men's basketball, right? They've all won national championships. Football came close. They weren't close enough, but they came close. The SEC's just fine, Josh, right?
Well, it's the most dominant conference in collegiate athletics. Has been for quite a while, continues to be. I think a lot of people who talk about that topic are solely referencing football. Even though they'll talk about athletics at large, they're talking about football. And I come at that from the angle that I don't really hear basketball people talk like that all that much. When it comes tournament selection time, yeah, you may be talking about how many bids a league deserves, but that's very seasonal to me. I don't hear many college hoops fans in September kind of pounding the chest about conference superiority. That's mainly in the world of football. So I say that to say, if the SEC doesn't win the national title in football this year, you'll have people look you dead in the eye and say none of the rest of that stuff matters. And in relation to football, okay, it doesn't. But just say football then. And don't speak in totality, because then my boy Nuno is going to throw 37 things in your face accurately, as he just did. And what are you going to do about it? You're going to duck like the dude in the Matrix, and then you're going to say, well, yeah, but what about football? You lost in overtime of a playoff game again. You guys suck. Oh, cool. By what standard exactly? Oh, by the SEC's previous standard. Well, that's pretty convenient that you're judging the conference against the conference, and you're judging them against a standard no one else has even come close to touching in the history of this game.
Yesterday, Trev Alberts, A&M's AD, had a press conference and kind of laying out the framework for the future of A&M sports and went through the 410 scholarships that are being funded, not where the dollars are going to go, but the 6 programs that are going to be funded. And he said that this is our time, for A&M to really position themselves above the fray, above the rest of the pack. Do you believe that, like A&M as an institution, in football in particular, which is your expertise, do you think that A&M has put themselves in a position to kind of be above some of those other programs that historically, I think they all have some money, but it's a different level of resource and a different level of looking at the future?
I look at it a little bit differently. The short answer to your question is yeah, probably. They probably have positioned themselves that way. You've probably embarked upon an era that is uniquely shaped for Texas A&M to weaponize what Texas A&M is. Texas A&M has many, many layers baked into the identity of the program, the culture overall, that could make it a monster. So yeah, all that's true. Wouldn't matter if you didn't have the right head coach. It's all a moot point if you don't have the right head coach. So the first thing they did to do what he said, which is to place them above, is hire Mike Elko. Hire a guy, in other words, where you don't have to depend on out-resourcing people. Even though you can, that's not what you're depending on. All you really need to do is you need to be even. You need to make sure there's no one far ahead of you. Just be even. Because if you can look to your left and right and see the folks you're competing against, you trust internally that you can out-develop them. You can out-evaluate if need be, but you can out-execute them more times than not on game day. That's what I trust about Mike Elko. I told you that the week he got hired. And there was very little guesswork in that. I know you guys didn't have a ton of doubt about it, but I just remember the overwhelming feedback I got about the guy from people who had faced him when he was at Duke. And that was a short time, but they said, it's just really amazing to me that everybody's talking about like Kalen DeBoer at Alabama with good reason, but so much of the shine in that sort of hiring cycle went to Saban's out, DeBoer's in, and no one was paying attention to Elko, and they kept saying, you wait and you see the evaluation and development pieces. Everyone's talking about NIL and spending and all that, but that'll eventually settle down a little bit, and it's gonna circle back around to the things that matter most, which are good evaluations, developing relationships and recruiting, but then signing and developing guys, and that's where Mike Elko will shine. So if all else is at least equal, David, if all else is at least equal, and it may be better than equal, but if it's at least equal, that's why I trust what Trev Alberts said, but I trust it because of the hire they made, and then everything else sort of works downstream of that.
100% agree with you, and it's twofold to that, though, right? I think you have to have the right coach, and you have to have the right quarterback, right? And the right quarterback doesn't have to be the best quarterback. Will Howard, last year, was not the best quarterback in college football. He was the right quarterback for that system, especially late.
That is something that I think could play out again this year, conditionally, just across the country. I'm not even talking about A&M, but the concept of, in this era, the portal era, we do see a lot of movement at that position. Therefore, you see more guys at a second or third stop than you used to see. Well, what that does, sort of as an unintended consequence, is it measures staffs against each other. If I watch Will Howard play for you for 3 years, and this was his maximum potential, so to speak, then he comes to me and he's 20% better, well, what does it say about you? I'm not casting aspersions on Kansas State. I'm speaking generically. What if Carson Beck just lights it up at Miami this year? I don't know what that says about Mike Bobo or what it says about Georgia or whatnot. So I do think also, though, you fast forward at any given period, you fast forward 5 years down the road, and everything about your roster would be crystal clear. Because by 5 years from now, either your results or the NFL draft and NFL production or a combination of all of that will tell the entire story of what you have on your roster 5 years prior. Well, we don't get the benefit of looking into that crystal ball. But what always amazes me is look at teams that win at a high level in college, hit the fast forward button 5 years. The teams that won And then you look back in retrospect and you realize they were doing it without a future all-pro at this position or that position, especially quarterback. That to me is the most under talked about, underwritten about impressive part of this sport. Everyone just looks at a winner as a winner. Well, all due respect to LSU 2019, you got Joe Burrow at quarterback. Okay, that's amazing. But what if you rewind a few years and you had like Jake Coker at quarterback and you won? Well, that to me is the trophy looks the same, but it's a little different story. And so I wonder what 2030 will say about this year's Texas A&M team.
Talking to Josh Pate here on TexAgs Live. Josh, let's talk about one of the you got a question on your show about wild card teams that could make the postseason. And I kind of want to go through like how you evaluated that, because when we talk about a wild card team, you're not talking about the gimmies, right? You're not talking about the Georgias and Texases that are expected. I think you said what the four best in the SEC. That's a kind of a different tier. It would be that next level, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And A&M and Oklahoma were the leaders in that next section.
Yeah, I looked at the odds at FanDuel. I took the top 5 out. A viewer had asked me, how deep is this league of teams that, if everything goes right, could win it? And so Oklahoma was one. And I think it's really hard to do this apples to apples because not everyone plays the same schedule. But Oklahoma, I think they are viewed as a bad team that's trying to rebound. And I think it's a bad QB offensive coordinator situation that's trying to rebound. And neither is good, but the latter's a lot easier to do this and fix if you go get a quarterback offensive coordinator combo, which they did, and I think he'll be effective there. They'll be effective there. But then outside of that, okay, if we look at Auburn, every spring and summer, David, there is the propensity, I've fallen victim to this many times, so I speak from personal experience, to look at the past year and to find the team that had terrible turnover margin luck and say, if that team just flips their turnover margin and nothing else, then they'll be good this year, which is true. However, sometimes the turnover margin is not merely luck. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. And with Auburn last year, I went back and watched several of their games the other day in preparation for being able to talk about this for the next few months. It wasn't bad luck. They had a skill in turning the ball over. So you bring in a turnover-prone quarterback in Jackson Arnold, who was a former 5-star guy, former Elite 11 MVP, but I think those accolades fade the more and more we have a sample size of you at the college level. And then you plug him into an offense that historically, even when it's working, Hugh Freeze's offenses have had a higher turnover rate. That I don't know if double negative doesn't always equal a positive there. But if somehow it just works there, they've got the talent roster that gives them a puncher's chance of winning the SEC. I went with A&M, absolutely went with A&M, because I think if A&M plays the style of football that they're trying to play, there's a lot less variance in the outcome. Like if that ground game is what it should be, if the defensive elevation is what it should be, given the insane focus on that entire side of the ball, there shouldn't be wild differences in Texas A&M results and outcomes. Now, what you will have is you'll have a ton of close games. So you'll have a ton of one possession here and there. And I think probably more than the turnover margin, which everyone cares about, the one possession game outcome margin, A&M, the difference in being +3 and -3 in that category is the difference in playing in Atlanta and 7-5, 8-4.
Yeah, and one of the things that you've said in this interview, you've said before, is how much you trust what Coach Elko is going to do from a development standpoint. So going back to that comment, all the focus on the defense, I know I got to see it to believe it, but I have so much faith that the defense is going to be better. And you can't copy and paste one season to the next, right? The results from last year do not apply to this year. That being said, if you just tell me that Coach Elko is putting his fingers on this defense and some of the additions that they've made from a roster perspective, I know they lost dudes on the defensive line. I feel like those one possession games are going to – November's going to feel different. That's what I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I trust the sum of incremental additions. I trust the collective sum of incremental progress. There's no one guy that's going to go from nearly being benched to being a Thorpe Award winner or anything like that. And maybe they will, but I don't count on that. I just count on the collective performing a little bit better per position group than they did last year. It's probably not even something that your eyes can see any given series. It's just you get off the field on third down a few times and you find yourself at halftime where you're leading whoever 17-6, and you find yourself saying, this is just not the way it would have been. That game would not have gone this way last year, especially the second half of last year. That is the Elko effect. If it plays out that way, that would be the Mike Elko effect.
Let me close out with this. A couple teams that A&M is going to play: Missouri on the road, South Carolina at home. Why are you a little iffy on them in their postseason aspirations?
So I'm iffy on Missouri because I don't blindly trust that they answered quarterback. I do trust that if Bo Pribula is going to be a good quarterback, he's in a great spot. So it's not me doubting, it's me questioning. Mm-hmm. I view that in two different compartments. And then you mentioned South Carolina, right?
Yes, sir.
South Carolina, people are talking about them like it's tennis, where it's a one-man deal. If it was a one-man deal, if it was Lenora Sellers versus, then I'd have them as a national championship contender. It's the same thing with Carolina as it is with Missouri. It's not me doubting. It's me questioning, how deep are they going to be at receiver? Is their tailback situation settled? They still got a guy they're trying to get eligible right now. So many guys they sent in the NFL draft from the defensive side that history tells me I cannot blindly trust South Carolina to backfill like Georgia does or like Ohio State does. So my only point is an alarming amount of the college football public is talking about South Carolina like that is assumed, and I don't just assume it. That's all I've said.
Good stuff, Josh. I appreciate you, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, sir.
Later, man.